Officer Colt Remington and his loyal German Shepherd Whiskey were patrolling the snow-blanketed forest around Silver Creek when they suddenly froze. Ahead, a young woman, Lila Rose McKenna, lay trapped in a steel bear trap, her muffled cries slicing through the winter hush. She wasn't just injured, she was fleeing a merciless cross-border trafficking gang, her tattered coat and terrified eyes telling a story of unspeakable horror. Colt had faced danger before, but nothing like this. With Whiskey growling at some unseen threat in the trees, Colt knew that saving her might cost them everything. What unfolded next would bring tears and restore faith in miracles. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. A storm had roared down from the Canadian border, smothering the tiny frontier town of Silver Creek, Montana, in a blanket of white silence. The mountains rose like dark sentinels in the distance, their peaks swallowed by whirling snow. Out here, the wilderness stretched endlessly, pines bowed under ice rivers frozen into glimmering silver blades, and trails disappearing without a trace. Officer Colt Remington guided his patrol SUV slowly along the forest road, tires biting the slick, icy ground. At 36, Colt carried the quiet discipline of a man hardened by wars. Once a military police officer overseas, he had settled in Silver Creek, where border crimes and relentless winters demanded a different kind of endurance. His storm-gray eyes flicked constantly between the tree line and the snow-covered path, every nerve sharpened by years of vigilance. His Navy-issued winter patrol jacket bore the sheriff's star, a small beacon of authority in a land where law often bowed under shadow. In the back, Whiskey, his 5-year-old German Shepherd partner, shifted restlessly. The dog's sable and black fur bristled with tension, amber eyes glowing with instinctive alertness. Whiskey wasn't just a companion. He was a trained canine fierce in combat, bound to Colt by unbreakable loyalty. Together they had saved each other more than once. The radio sputtered, drowned by the storm. Colt reached to adjust it, then froze as Whiskey suddenly stiffened, ears snapping upright, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Colt whispered, hand inching toward the flashlight on his belt. At first, only the wind whispered through the trees. Then came the faint, broken sound, almost swallowed by the storm. Not a scream, not even a call, just a weak moan. Someone too hurt to cry, leaking through the snow like a dying ember. Colt killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed heavy. He opened the door, stepping into the snow, cold biting at his face. Whiskey leapt down beside him, nose to the ground, ears swiveling. They pressed into the forest together, following the fragile sound. The groan came again, longer this time, low and desperate. Colt's stomach clenched. Whoever it was dared not call out. They were hiding, trying not to be found. They trudged deeper until the beam of Colt's flashlight revealed a figure at the base of a pine. Lila Rose McKenna looked barely 22. Brown hair tangled and frosted with ice. A torn wool coat clung to her slender frame. Jeans ripped at the knee boots, caked with snow and blood. Her pale face trembled as she struggled to stay silent. Her left leg was clamped in the jaws of a massive steel bear trap, teeth sunk deep into flesh and bone. Blood soaked the snow in a dark halo. Colt knelt beside her. Lila's glassy eyes widened with terror before softening into relief. She tried to speak but only managed a faint groan, clutching at the snow as if it might hold her together. "You're going to be okay," Colt said quickly, voice firm, yet calm. "I'm Officer Remington, Silver Creek Sheriff's Department. This is Whiskey. We've got you now." Whiskey circled, cautiously, hackles raised. His growl deepened, turning toward the trees. Colt followed the gaze and spotted fresh tracks in the snow, more than one set leading into darkness. Whoever laid the trap had been here not long ago. Lila's lips moved. Colt leaned closer and caught a whispered plea. "Find me." Her voice was hoarse, broken. Colt hushed her gently. "Not while we're here." He studied the trap, massive, forged for grizzlies. The steel jaws had chewed through her ankle. Freeing her risked more bleeding, yet leaving her wasn't an option. Memories of Afghanistan surged back, a winter patrol, a comrade caught in a crude wire trap, the frantic struggle to carry him to safety through snow and bullets. Colt clenched his jaw, refusing to let another life slip away. "Hold still," he told her. He wedged a metal bar from his kit into the springs. Muscles strained, snow crunching beneath his boots as he fought against the iron resistance. Lila's body shuddered in pain, a muffled groan escaping as she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Whiskey barked sharply, pawing the snow nose pressed against droplets of blood trailing away. Colt didn't need translation. The dog was warning him. Someone else was out there close. "Almost there," he muttered, throwing all his weight onto the bar. The trap shrieked, jaws creaking open inch by inch. With a final heave, the steel gave. Colt yanked Lila Rose McKenna's leg free. The trap snapped shut again with a vicious clang, rattling the surrounding trees. Lila Rose McKenna collapsed into the snow, gasping for air. Colt Remington moved quickly, wrapping her mangled ankle with practiced hands, steady from years of experience. She winced, but her eyes clung to him, a mixture of fear and fragile hope. "They're hunting me," she rasped, each word torn from her throat. "Men from the border. They take girls, sell us. I ran." Colt's chest tightened. Rumors of trafficking through the frozen passes had haunted Silver Creek for months, but now he had living proof bleeding right before him. Whiskey snarled again, eyes locked on the unseen threat in the trees, muscles taut, every instinct screaming danger. Colt finished the bandage and lifted Lila into his arms. She was light as driftwood, her body weakened from blood loss and exhaustion. Her head fell against his chest, breath ragged. "We're moving," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Whiskey trotted ahead, scanning the darkness, his growl fading into tense silence. Snowflakes thickened, masking their tracks, but Colt knew the storm would not hide them for long. The traffickers were close. The forest seemed to watch as they vanished into the night, the faint trail of blood behind them, marking the start of a fight Colt hadn't chosen, but could not abandon. Snow lashed harder against the windshield as he guided Lila toward his patrol SUV parked along the ridge road. The forest groaned under the storm branches, bowed beneath heavy ice, and every sound seemed sharper, carried by the wind. Lila's head lolled weakly against Colt's chest, skin clammy from the cold. Whiskey padded ahead, paws crunching into the snow, ears flicking with every gust, as if expecting shapes to emerge from the darkness. Colt opened the back door carefully, lowering Lila onto the seat. Her torn wool coat, frayed at the edges, barely covered her trembling body. He pulled a blanket from the emergency kit, wrapping it around her shoulders. Up close, he could see she was younger than she had appeared in the woods. Her face was gaunt, not from age, but from hunger and fear. "Stay with me," Colt said, checking her bandaged ankle. Blood seeped through the cloth, but at least it had slowed. He reached into his glove compartment for a small thermos and offered her lukewarm water. Lila's hands shook as she took it, sipping with desperate gratitude. Whiskey hopped in beside her, positioning himself protectively at her feet. The GermanShepherd sniffed her bandaged leg, then glanced up at Colt, letting out a short whine, as if to say, "She's fading fast." Colt's storm-gray eyes softened briefly before hardening again as he looked into the forest. They had to move. He started the engine headlights, cutting through the snow-choked road. Before driving off, Whiskey pawed at the car's threshold nose pressed into the snow. He tugged at something half-buried near the tracks of the men Colt had noticed earlier. Colt stepped out with his flashlight. Whiskey unearthed a strip of dark fabric stiff with blood. Colt held it up the beam, revealing the stains in stark detail. It was a piece of women's flannel, the type often worn in working-class northern towns. Lila's eyes widened at the sight. She swallowed, voice barely a whisper. "One of the girls. She got hurt when we tried to run." Colt crouched by the open door. "How many, 7? Lila replied, lips trembling as she clutched the blanket tighter. "They kept us in an old storage barn near the border. Guards with rifles, sometimes dogs. I don't know where the others are now. When the storm hit, I found a chance. I ran. I didn't even look back until the trap caught me." The car fell silent, heavy and suffocating. Colt studied her. Lila had the hollowed look of someone who had lived days, maybe weeks, in captivity. She couldn't have been more than 22, likely from a small town, given her modest clothes. Yet her determination shone through the cracked lips and tired eyes, forcing her story past the fear. Colt tightened his grip on the bloody fabric. "Then you're not the only victim. We'll find the others." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed. "They'll kill them. They'll come after me too. You don't understand," she added, voice quivering. "These men, they're not afraid of lawmen. They pay them." Colt felt her words like ice plunging into his chest. Corruption. He had seen it overseas and had hoped Silver Creek might be different. But her warning rang too true. He turned the SUV onto the main road, wheels groaning as they fought through snowdrifts. "We'll get you safe first," he said firmly. "Then we deal with the rest." Lila rose. McKenna's head fell back against the seat, eyes tracing the dark blur of forest, streaking past through the storm. For a heartbeat, Colt Remington thought she'd slipped into unconsciousness, but then her voice rasped again, raw and strained. "They kept a ledger, names, numbers, even photos. They trade girls like cattle." Across the line, she continued, "No one cares who they belong to." Colt's jaw tightened, knuckles white on the steering wheel. He had faced firefights, seen comrades fall. But this, the thought of young women treated like cargo, burned hotter in his chest than any bullet wound he'd ever felt. Whiskey, sensing his tension, lifted his head and let out a low, steady growl, eyes locked on the road behind them, as if he too could smell the evil chasing them. Minutes later, they emerged into a clearing where the snow thinned, revealing jagged mountain outlines. The road forked. One path led back to Silver Creek, the other veered closer to the border. Colt hesitated, scanning the darkness. Instincts, screaming danger, lurked close. Lila shivered beneath the blanket, finally meeting his eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me back." He looked at her, then down at Whiskey, who sat upright now, amber eyes glowing with unspoken promise. The strip of fabric in Colt's hand felt heavier than iron. It was proof others were still out there, bleeding, waiting. "We're not turning back," he murmured. The SUV pressed forward, lights cutting through the snow-choked path. Whiskey pressed his nose to the window, memorizing the scent of the wind. Colt knew she was right. The men pursuing them weren't just criminals. They were shielded by silence, maybe even by men in uniform. But as long as Whiskey's growl guided him and the storm masked their trail, hope remained. Tonight, Silver Creek's frozen forest had given them Lila. Tomorrow, it might give them the rest. The storm reached its fiercest as Colt left the main patrol road and steered the SUV onto a narrow track, slicing through the pines. Snow pounded the windshield in blinding sheets, wipers struggling to keep pace. The heater roared, yet a biting chill seeped through every crack. Static hissed from the radio, his last attempt to call dispatch, drowned in bursts of broken words. He knew then no backup would come tonight. Lila huddled in the back, swaddled in the wool blanket Colt had pulled from the trunk. Her face was pale beneath damp strands of brown hair, lips tinged blue. She tried to hold herself upright, but exhaustion dragged her against the seat. One hand pressed against the bandaged leg where the bear trap had torn flesh. Breaths came shallow and fast, as if the storm had climbed inside her chest. Colt's hand remained firm on the wheel, the other hovering near his holster. Eyes scanned the road ahead, though thoughts drifted elsewhere. The roar of the blizzard tugged memories from distant mountains of Afghanistan, the endless snow soldiers pinned under fire screams echoing in white silence. Back then he had carried a friend bleeding through drifts shadowed by enemies who never slept. He remembered the crushing weight of responsibility and the icy bite of fear. Tonight felt the same, only the life depending on him wasn't a soldier. It was a young woman stumbling through a hell she hadn't chosen. Beside him, Whiskey balanced against the SUV's turns with ease, ears pricked, nose pressed close to the glass. Suddenly his body stiffened, a low growl vibrating through the storm's silence. Colt slowed the SUV, shining his flashlight through the blizzard. The beam caught something that tightened his stomach, a thin wisp of smoke twisting upward from the roadside, faint, yet fresh. He stopped, stepping out into the snow, boots sinking nearly to the ankle. Colt crouched, lifting the glowing cigarette butt with gloved fingers, tucking it into his pocket. "They're close," he muttered, more to Whiskey than anyone else. From the back seat, Lila stirred, voice rough with fear. "They won't stop. If they're hunting us," Colt murmured, eyes meeting hers in the rear-view mirror, "they'll circle until we're trapped. Then we make sure we're the ones doing the trapping." The SUV groaned as it climbed toward the ranger's cabin, finally coming into view, a lone silhouette half buried in snow timbers, sagging walls still standing. It sat in a clearing, pines groaning under the storm's weight. Colt guided Lila to the cot inside, helping her ease down, tucking the blanket tighter around her. Her eyes flicked to the shadows, scanning like a bird watching for hawks. "They'll wait out there," she whispered. "That's what they do," Colt said softly. "Wait until you think you're safe." Whiskey padded through the cabin nails, tapping softly on the floor. He sniffed along the walls before returning to the door, body-stiff nose testing the air seeping through the cracks. A low growl rumbled in his chest, constant though not loud. He could hear what humans could not. Colt checked the stove, found a few splinters of wood, and lit a small fire. He kept the fire low, just enough to warm the cabin without giving away their position to anyone outside. Colt Remington set his revolver within easy reach, then crouched by the window, peering through the broken shutters. Snow swirled in frantic patterns, yet beneath the storm he thought he caught another sound, a muffled crunch, boots pressing into the snow. Lila Rose McKenna pulled the blanket tighter, shivering. "They're close. I can feel it." Colt didn't answer. He let the storm settle around his senses, recalling a lesson from his father, a Wyoming forest ranger before the war. "Don't just look, listen. The woods will tell you when you're not alone." Tonight the woods screamed, the hours dragging. The storm rattled the shutters like angry fists. Occasionally, Colt thought he caught faint noises, branches snapping, snow shifting under weight. Lila stirred fitfully, waking with sudden jerks, eyes wide and wild, until she saw Whiskey still stationed at the door. The German Shepherd never moved, never blinked, a living wall. Each time a sound drifted through the snow, his ears flicked a low growl rolling through his chest. At one point, Colt stepped outside to check the perimeter. The storm clawed at his coat, tearing at his breath. He swept the flashlight beam across the clearing and froze. Tracks, fresh prints in the snow, half covered by drifts, but clear enough to follow. At least 3 sets circling wide, keeping distance. He followed them a short way, then stopped, when Whiskey barked sharply from the doorway, summoning him back. Back inside, Colt barred the door with an old timber. His voice was low, steady. "We're not alone tonight." Lila's eyes glimmered with fear, but also anger. "They'll never stop, not until I'm back in that cage or dead in the snow." Colt met her gaze. "They'll stop if we make them." The storm raged on the cabin, trembling with each gust of wind. Whiskey lay pressed against the door, amber eyes burning in the dim light. First line, last line, the shield between predator and prey. Colt watched him and felt a surge of grim confidence. Whatever hunted outside would have to face not only him, but the loyal fury of a German shepherd who had never failed to hold his ground. The night pressed against the cabin walls like a living thing, its howls and groans blending with the storm. Colt had learned to read silence during his military years, the unnatural stillness just before an attack. Tonight carried that same weight. Lila curled on the cot, clutching the blanket eyes, tracking every creak of the floorboards. Whiskey remained at the door, muscles taut, ears pricked. Every sense tuned to the shifting world outside. Then it came a faint, deliberate crunch in the snow, piercing the storm's roar. Whiskey's head jerked growl, rising low and steady. Colt snatched his revolver from the table and raised a hand to Lila, silently signaling her to stay put. He crouched at the window, pulling aside the tattered curtain, just enough to glimpse dark shapes moving among the trees. 3 figures advanced through the snow shadows against the pale storm, their movements practiced and slow. The first man to step into the clearing was huge, easily over 6 feet broad-shouldered, in a heavy fur-lined jacket. A thick beard flecked with ice, his scarred face hard and unforgiving. He would later be known as Zane Holloway, 40. A drifter from the Dakotas turned smuggler after losing steady work. He carried a hunting rifle slung over his back and a knife glinting in his gloved hand. Behind him, a wiry man with sunken cheeks and darting eye. Young, no older than 30, malnourished, hollow-faced. His patchwork denim jacket and split boots hid quick, practiced hands gripping a pistol. Boone McAllister, once a border farmhand, now a runner for the gang. The third was older, perhaps mid-50s, gray hair long beneath a wool cap coat, hanging loose eyes flat and cold. He moved with the weary grace of someone hardened by a life of cruelty. Colt's gut told him this one was dangerous not for strength, but experience. The door shuttered under the storm, then something heavier pushed against it. Whiskey exploded forward, barking with such force the air seemed to shake. The men froze, then one lunged, forcing the door inward. Whiskey struck first. A blur of fur and teeth, he clamped down on Zane Holloway's forearm, the very arm holding the knife. Zane roared in shock as blood sprayed across the snow, the blade clattering uselessly to the floor. Colt surged forward, colliding with Boone McAllister. Fists and boots flew in the cramped cabin. Lila screamed, the sound swallowed by the storm. The older intruder kicked the door open, fully shoving past Whiskey, but faltered when Lila, despite her injury and trembling frame, grabbed a heavy timber beside the stove. With a cry ripped from deep within her, she swung it across his shoulder, staggering him into the wall. Colt grappled Boone, his training taking over. He wrenched the pistol free and slammed the man's head against the floorboards. Blood spattered, and Boone went limp, groaning. Whiskey released Zane Holloway's mangled arm just long enough to shove him backward into the snow. The man clutched his wound, horror etched on his face. The older intruder, stunned by Lila Rose McKenna's strike, scrambled to his knees, eyes wild. He spat curses, catching sight of his fallen partners and the German Shepherd standing between them and the girl. Survival instincts overruled loyalty. He staggered to the door and vanished into the storm. Zane, bleeding heavily, followed, dragging Boone McAllister by the collar. Silence returned to the clearing, broken only by Lila's ragged breathing and Whiskey's low growl gradually fading. Colt Remington stood panting, pistol still in hand, scanning the cabin for any sign of return. None came. Lila dropped the timber hands, shaking violently. She whispered, almost in disbelief, they were real. They were actually here. Colt knelt beside her, steadying her trembling shoulders. They won't get you tonight. Not while I'm here. Not while Whiskey's here. The shepherd pressed his head gently against Lila's knee, a silent reassurance that the fight was theirs. Colt's eyes then caught something near the door, half buried in snow, dragged in during the scuffle. Whiskey pawed at it, uncovering a folded sheet of paper. Colt picked it up, brushing off the flakes. It was a crude map marked with heavy black ink. Colt scanned it quickly. An X circled in red marked a ridge near the border alongside the words, Main Camp. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just about Lila. There were more women, perhaps children, still trapped in the gang's hands. Whiskey whined softly, as if understanding the weight of the discovery. Colt folded the map and tucked it into his coat. The storm howled outside, pressing the world in, but inside the cabin, a fragile sense of triumph lingered. They had survived the first attack, struck back, and now carried a clue that could turn defense into rescue. Lila leaned back against the wall, pale but resolute eyes fixed on Colt. "Though come again," she murmured. He met her gaze. "The next time we'll be ready." Whiskey pressed against his leg, the living shadow of loyalty and strength. Together they stood against the storm, and the darkness prowling beyond. By dawn, the storm had eased, though the land remained buried beneath its fury. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, frost lacing the broken shutters like delicate lace. Colt stood at the door, pistol holstered, but within reach, as pale light crept over the horizon. He hadn't slept, and neither had Whiskey, planted like a sentinel, eyes burning amber in the dim morning light. Lila stirred weakly on the cot, her face wan but determined. "We're moving," Colt said quietly. "You need a doctor?" She tried to rise, wincing as her injured leg brushed the floor. "I can walk." "No." Colt cut her off, voice steady, but not unkind. "You lean on me." He wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, then guided her back to the SUV. Whiskey trotted beside them, head high, daring the woods to produce another threat. The drive to Silver Creek was long roads nearly swallowed by white. When they finally reached the small frontier town, it was still half asleep. The main street, lined with shuttered shops and frosted lampposts, was silent. Only the Silver Creek Medical Clinic glowed with light at that early hour, a squat brick and timber structure that had endured decades of harsh winters. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmth. A nurse in her 50s, gray hair tied in a bun, looked up from her desk. Cora Bell Hannigan, a widow who had served the clinic for 30 years, saw Lila pale and blood-stained. "My lord," she whispered, rushing to help. "Get her into exam 2. Colt carried Lila into a small room lined with faded charts and cabinets of supplies. Cora worked quickly, sterilizing wounds, stitching where she could, and rewrapping the leg in fresh bandages. Lila clenched her jaw, but bore the pain with quiet resilience, fingers digging into the cot's edge. While Cora tended to her Colt, wandered toward the front desk, glancing at a stack of files on a shelf. He pulled one at random, then another. The names struck him like cold iron women listed as missing over the past 2 years. Each file ended the same case, closed no further leads. The pattern was too neat, too final, too wrong. 3 more files told the same story. Missing women, mostly young, many from small towns near the border, written off as if their lives had vanished into thin air. Lila's voice, ragged but clear, broke the silence. They weren't just from Montana. Some girls, they spoke Spanish-French. They said they were taken near Alberta, near Chihuahua, the camp. It's not just Americans. They cross everyone through here. Colt set the files down slowly, jaw tightening. Canada, Mexico. Victims stolen from both sides funneled into the frozen wilderness of Silver Creek's borderlands. This wasn't the work of a local gang alone, it was bigger coordinated. Whiskey stiffened low growl rolling from his chest. He wandered toward the front of the clinic, nose pressed against the swinging door. The bell jingled above as a man stepped inside, snow crusted along his boots. Mid-40s, tall and lean jaw, clean-shaven, sharp brown eyes. Silas Boone, a respected Border Patrol officer in Silver Creek, had served nearly a decade, known to locals as steady, calm, dependable. His uniform remained crisp despite the storm badge polished bright. Remington Boone said with a nod, "Heard your call last night, got lost in the storm. You all right?" Before Colt could answer, Whiskey lunged forward, teeth bared, growl erupting like thunder. The shepherd planted himself between Boone and the exam room, hackles raised, refusing entry. The dog's fury was so sudden, so absolute, even Cora Bell Hannigan gasped and stepped back. Boone froze, eyes narrowing. "Control your animal." Colt didn't move. He watched Whiskey carefully. This dog had never misjudged a man. Slowly, Colt stepped closer, storm-gray eyes locking on Boone. Funny thing, he doesn't usually react like that unless he smells blood on someone's hands. Boone's expression didn't shift, but his jaw tightened for a moment before settling back into calm. "Long night, Remington. Dog's probably just spooked from the fight," Lila's voice called weakly from the exam room, trembling. "That's him. I saw him near the camp. He's one of them." The clinic fell silent. Cora froze hand halfway to a tray of gauze eyes darting between Colt and Boone. Boone's smile was thin and practiced, but his eyes were ice. "She's delirious. You can't take the word of a half-dead girl running from shadows," Colt muttered, hand inching toward his holster. Whiskey didn't ease, growl deepening until it rattled the floor. The air inside the small clinic was thick, heavy, with suspicion, truth pressing against silence. Boone adjusted his gloves with slow precision. "I'll report back later. You get some rest, Remington." He turned and walked out, the bell jingling behind him. The storm swallowed his figure quickly, yet the stench of betrayal lingered. Lila collapsed back against the cot, exhausted. Cora's face was pale, lips pressed thin. Colt stood by the door long after Whiskey at his side, eyes scanning the snow where the enemy no longer dared appear. The sky over Silver Creek had turned iron gray. Thick clouds smothered the sun, and the wind returned, sweeping fresh snow across the valley like an unending tide. Colt stood outside the clinic, folded map in hand, paper stiff with frost. His storm-gray eyes studied the red mark circled along the border ridge. The storm might have cleared enough for the roads, but time was not on their side. If the traffickers realized Lila had escaped, they might abandon the camp or kill the remaining captives to erase evidence. Inside, Lila adjusted the heavy coat Cora had lent her. She looked small, swallowed by fabric, but her eyes burned with new steel. Every step slow and painful from her bandaged leg, yet she refused Colt's suggestion to stay behind. "I know the layout," she insisted. "I know where they keep the others. You'd waste hours searching without me." Whiskey padded between them, restless ears swiveling like weather vanes. The shepherd pressed his nose against Colt's knee, sniffed the ground tail, stiff with the readiness of a soldier. They drove only as far as the trail allowed. After that, Colt left the SUV hidden among pine snow, masking its tracks. The forest closed around them in a cathedral of white, and silence broken only by the crunch of boots and the steady huff of Whiskey's breath. Colt led with the map. Lila leaned on a walking stick he had fashioned from a branch, while Whiskey ranged ahead, his black and sable coat blending into the shadows. The deeper they went, the more Lila whispered, describing the camp, a long wooden shed reinforced with barbed wire, guarded by 2 or 3 armed men at all times. A pit stove kept the building warm, and sometimes the men burned cheap tobacco that clung to their clothes. Colt listened, committing every detail to memory. At one point, Whiskey halted abruptly. His body sank low to the snow tail, straight ears pricked forward. A single sharp bark, then Silent's nose pressed into the wind. Colt froze, signaling Lila to crouch. From the trees came faint voices. 2 men spoke in low tones, words indistinct, footsteps close. Whiskey crept forward, belly low, disappearing into a cluster of shrubs. Moments later he returned, silent but insistent, nudging Colt's thigh. He had seen enough. Patrols were near. Colt guided Lila into the hollow of a fallen log until the voices faded into the storm. Without Whiskey's warning, they would have walked straight into danger. The path narrowed as they climbed toward the ridge. Snow clung to the branches like shards of glass, and darkness deepened as evening closed in. Colt Remington checked the map again, his gloved finger tracing the line that ended at the red X. "We're close," he whispered. Lila Rose McKenna swallowed breath, shaky. "The entrance. It's not a door. It's a tunnel," Colt murmured. "Wooden planks cover it, hidden under snow so no one sees." Whiskey sniffed the ground, then let out a sharp, certain bark. He pawed at a drift of snow near the base of an outcrop. Colt knelt beside him, brushing away the powder. Timbers emerged, a trap door of rough boards camouflaged beneath ice and pine branches. Colt pressed a hand to the wood. Faint smells drifted up: beans, stale bread, meat gone sour. Beneath that, another odor, blood faint but fresh. Whiskey's nose twitched, growl low, but controlled, as if he already knew suffering lay beneath these boards. Lila's voice cracked. "This is it. This is where they keep them." Colt's pulse thundered in his ears. He had anticipated it, yet reality hit harder. The proof of Lila's story lay just below. He placed a steadying hand on Whiskey's neck. "Not yet, boy. First we need a plan." They retreated into the trees, settling in a small hollow where snow had drifted less deep. Colt spread the map across a fallen log, the weak glow of his flashlight illuminating the lines. Lila pointed with trembling fingers, describing guard shifts, meal patterns, and how one rear door was sometimes left unlocked when the men grew careless. Whiskey lay beside them, ears swiveling constantly. Twice he gave soft, breathy barks, the signal Colt had trained him to use when danger approached. Each time they froze until footsteps faded into the woods. Whiskey's senses sliced through the storm like a blade, making him their unseen scout. When the last patrol passed, Colt exhaled slowly. "We wait for dark," he said. "Then we move." Lila nodded, fear and determination battling in her eyes. "If we don't, they'll move the girls. Or worse." Colt folded the map, tucking it into his coat. His gaze swept to Whiskey. Amber eyes steady in the gloom. The dog had already proven himself shield and hunter. Tonight he would be their ears, their nose, their first line of survival. As the storm thickened, the three huddled in silence, listening to snapping branches and faint voices carried by the wind. Somewhere below, in the hidden tunnel, lives hung in the balance. Colt's hand brushed the grip of his revolver. Lila clutched the blanket tighter, and Whiskey's growl rumbled low like thunder ready to strike. Darkness draped the ridge heavily, but thin ribbons of lamplight leaked from cracks in the timber walls of the camp below. Smoke from a barrel fire curled skyward, carrying the bitter stench of cheap tobacco and grease. Colt lay prone on the ridge above the tunnel entrance, binoculars pressed to his eyes, heart steady, though the storm beat against his coat. Lila crouched close, breath forming clouds, one hand bracing her walking stick, the other clutching the blanket. Whiskey belly low to the snow crept a few feet ahead, amber eyes catching the camp's faint glow like embers waiting to ignite. They had planned to wait for a guard shift change, but fate was impatient. A careless crunch of snow under Lila's injured leg sent one of the men near the fire into alert. He was tall, broad-shouldered, perhaps 25, in a thick parka and ski mask. Hank Dobbs, a recruit from the border towns who knew nothing but violence, turned sharply toward the ridge, raising his rifle. Down Colt hissed, but the warning came too late. Bullets tore through the snow, scattering powder into the air. Whiskey exploded from his crouch, furious bark charging ahead, and the quiet camp shattered into chaos. Colt returned fire, each shot precise, honed by years of training, but there were more than he had counted. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him half around, blood spreading across his jacket. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself upright and fired again, pushing through the pain. Lila pressed against the snow, trembled, but refused to cower. She grabbed a sharp, heavy stone from the ground and hurled it with every ounce of strength she had. It clattered against a barrel. Two guards broke formation heads, snapping toward the noise. It was enough. Colt surged forward, seizing the opening. Whiskey leapt past him in a blur of teeth and fury, lunging straight at the man wielding the camp's heaviest weapon, a compact machine gun crudely mounted on a tripod. Shadow's weight and force knocked him flat, jaws clamping around his wrist. The weapon clattered sideways, its deadly spray abruptly halted. The man screamed, thrashing to break free, but Whiskey's snarl rolled like thunder eyes blazing. Inside the main shed, cries erupted. Lila's thrown stone had distracted the guards just long enough for Colt Remington to reach the barred door. Through the cracks, he saw them two young women, no older than Lila, gaunt from hunger, eyes wide with fear. Colt kicked the latch loose with his foot, yanking the door open and motioning them out. One was dark-haired, clad in the remnants of a torn red sweater. The other had blonde hair matted with dirt, bare feet, despite the snow, run to the tree line. Colt barked, covering them as they staggered free. Lila limped to their side, urging them forward despite her own pain. Gunfire snapped behind them. Colt spun, confronting the leader. He was tall, gaunt, mid-40s, with a narrow, cruel face. His coat was military surplus, patched with insignia long stripped of honor. This was Clay Rowe, a drifter rumored to have served as a mercenary overseas. A pistol gleamed in his hand, and his smile oozed arrogance. "You should have left her in the snow," Clay drawled, low and gravelly. "Now you'll all vanish with the rest." Before Colt could draw his weapon, Whiskey barreled between them, body a shield. A shot rang out, striking the shepherd's flank. Whiskey stumbled, blood staining his fur, but he stood tall, teeth bared, growl deep in his chest. He refused to yield. Colt, ignoring the fire in his wounded shoulder, lunged forward, knocking Clay's pistol aside. The two men grappled, fists and boots colliding in the snow. Clay was wiry, but strong, strikes sharp and ruthless. Colt fought with the raw force of a man who had carried comrades through worse. They crashed into a tent, crates spilling across the ground. Documents, passports, photographs, and lists tumbled free. Colt's eyes caught them instantly. Dozens of faces of missing girls' names scrawled across fake identification. Proof enough to damn every man in this camp. Clay tried to snatch the pistol again, but Whiskey, bleeding yet relentless, hurled himself at the man's arm, dragging him down. Colt pressed the advantage, driving a knee into Clay's chest, wrenching the weapon free. He stood over him, revolver steady, despite the blood running down his arm. The fight stilled. The camp echoed only with Lila's ragged voice urging the freed girls into the trees, and Whiskey's low growl holding Clay pinned. The storm roared overhead, but inside the circle of blood and fire, Colt felt only silence. Clay spat into the snow, defiance lingering. "You can't stop it. There are more camps, more men. You'll drown in the snow before you bring us down." Colt's reply was calm, steady. "We'll see." He pressed the barrel harder against Clay's chest. Whiskey, though wounded, stayed, poised eyes unblinking, loyalty unbroken. The evidence lay scattered in the snow. The captives were freed. The leader was at Colt's mercy. The night had shifted, truth finally in his hands. Chaos bled slowly into the gray edge of morning. Snow churned and scarred around the camp, dotted with spent casings, footprints, and splatters of violence that shattered its silence. Colt, shoulder throbbing from the grazing bullet wound, kept his revolver leveled on Clay Rowe, now bound with rope scavenged from his own camp. Whiskey, bloodied along his flank, sat close, protective growl, humming deep in his chest. Lila knelt a few feet away, one arm around the two newly freed girls, whispering reassurances as their shivering eased bit by bit. Colt pulled the battered radio from his coat pocket. Static, hissing, until a signal finally broke through. His voice was clipped, steady. "This is Officer Colt Remington, Silver Creek. Sending coordinates, immediate federal response required. Victims recovered, suspects detained." He repeated the numbers carefully, pressing them into the air like nails. Hours later, the drone of helicopters grew over the ridge, followed by the crunch of tires as federal vehicles carved through the snow. From the storm emerged men and women in heavy parkas, marked with the insignia of Federal Investigative Services. At their front strode Josie Bell Rollins, early 40s, olive skin, dark hair, pinned beneath a fur-lined hood, eyes sharp as glass. Born in El Paso, daughter of a Mexican-American border guard, she had built her career chasing cross-border crime. Her coat was military green, cinched at the waist, rifle slung casually at her side, though her stride suggested she rarely needed to lift it to command. Walker, she greeted briskly, surveying the scene. Her gaze shifted from the bound Clay to the pile of forged passports and photographs Colt had gathered. "You've just handed us the proof we've been chasing for years." Colt inclined his head, exhaustion pressing at his frame. "It's bigger than this camp." Clay bragged there were more. Josie's jaw tightened, then she gave a curt nod. "And thanks to this, we'll find them. Every last one." Lila gestured, and her agents moved swiftly, cataloging evidence, comforting the victims, securing the suspects. Clay Rowe spat curses, but his words were drowned beneath the snap of handcuffs. Lila Rose McKenna was lifted gently onto a stretcher by 2 medics. She tried to protest, insisting she could walk, but Colt placed a firm hand on her shoulder, voice soft but steady. "Let them help you, Lila. You've done more than enough." Her eyes shimmered with tears, not just of pain, but relief. "They'll be safe now, won't they? The girls." "They will," Colt assured her, and for the first time since the storm began, he truly believed it. Whiskey limped to his side, fur matted with blood, but posture still proud. One of the federal medics reached to check him, but the shepherd pressed against Colt's leg first, eyes steady, as if asking permission. Colt gave a small nod, crouching to ruffle the fur behind Whiskey's ears. "You did good, partner. Better than anyone could ask." Days later, Silver Creek gathered in its modest town hall, transformed for the ceremony. Banners of the American flag hung against pine-paneled walls, and townsfolk filled the wooden benches, faces lit with gratitude and pride. At the front stood Josie Bell Rawlins, flanked by local officials. Colt, his arm now in a sling, stood beside Whiskey, who wore a temporary bandage across his flank, but held his head high. Josie's voice carried strong. In the face of corruption, violence, and bitter cold, courage stood firm. Officer Colt Remington and his K-9 partner Whiskey had not only uncovered the truth behind a trafficking ring, they had saved lives that would have otherwise vanished into silence. Applause thundered through the hall. Whiskey tilted his head, ears flicking, eyes bright, still alert, yet calm. Lila knelt, holding a folded piece of red cloth, and with a smile both tender and proud, tied it gently around Whiskey's neck. The shepherd remained still, eyes fixed on her, accepting the gift, as if he knew it carried weight beyond fabric. "Here for luck," Lila whispered. "You gave me mine back." The crowd fell silent, moved by the gesture. Colt watched, feeling a warmth rise in his chest. Not just pride, but quiet conviction. In Whiskey's loyalty, in Lila's resilience in the federal agents who had answered the call, he saw proof that courage and faith could shine even through the darkest storms. Applause returned louder now, a chorus of gratitude. Whiskey barked once, sharp and bright, echoing through the hall like a promise. Colt looked over the gathered faces, then down at his partner with the red scarf blazing against dark fur. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe not only in survival, but in redemption. Because loyalty, courage, and the refusal to bow to darkness had saved them all, and Colt knew it would continue to save others. In the end, this story reminds us that courage, loyalty, and compassion can bring light into even the darkest places. Just as Colt, Lila, and Whiskey found strength in each other, we too can find strength in faith and the miracles placed in our path. Sometimes a rescue comes in the form of a loyal friend, sometimes in bravery to confront evil, and sometimes in quiet faith that we are never truly alone. We may not face snowstorms or armed men daily, but we all confront fear, doubt, and hardship. Yet, like Whiskey guarding his partner, the Lord guards us. His miracles are subtle, yet always present if we choose to see them. If you believe in miracles and the power of faith to protect the broken and guide the lost, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe. Write Amen in the comments to stand with the spirit of courage and faith. May God bless you and your loved ones today and always.